Michael, okay, so you have been living in and reporting on Brazil for quite some time now. And we have the election coming up. Tell us exactly when it is and how things are looking between Lula da Silva, former president, now running again, and Jair Bolsonaro.
Yeah, so the first round is October 2nd, so it's in about 3 weeks. Brazil has this 2-round system, so you have the first round, and then 3 weeks later you have the second round. And if
is there a lightning round?
Wouldn't that be nice? Forget the second round. Let's go lightning. That's great. And basically, how it works is if a candidate can get the majority overall of all the votes, then he can win in the first round. And according to the latest polls, that could be Lula. Some of the latest polls show that Lula could actually take it in the first round. Wow. The very latest polls, though, shows that he's increased slightly from 44% up to 46%. Bolsonaro's about 15 points behind him. And then the rest of the candidates are all kind of in the single digits somewhere. Now, what's interesting, and I think what you'll like, Francesca, is, of course, there's always this other poll, right? This poll from the far right. It's called Paraná Pesquisas, which is then coming out, and that's more like Bolsonaro's people are going to follow this poll, and it's the one that's not reputable, but it shows that they're almost neck and neck. And this is what we always see, right? In Latin America, we always see like there's the main polls and there's other poll that's supposed to kind of back like the right-wing candidate, even though it looks like he's going to lose, as a way to then so he can claim fraud and then come out after the elections and say, see, I should have won or whatever. So
is that explicitly a right-wing poll, or is it a government poll that they've commandeered?
Good question. So Paraná Pesquisas, and I don't know enough about them, but it's a small pollster. Paraná is one of the most conservative states. In fact, that's the state where they had the big anti-corruption task force that actually jailed former President Lula. So it's like even just the name of it,
right.
It's really, really sad. But anyway, so that's the latest. And the Lula and Bolsonaro, they're traveling around the country. They're talking with people. Bolsonaro's big thing is these big motorcycle rallies where in every city he goes to, he's on the motorcycle. And he's driving up and down the streets, and people are cheering for him and stuff.
Very Butch.
What?
Very much.
and Bolsonaro's big thing is also this kind of religious rhetoric. The evangelicals, that's how he really came into office the last time. That's how he won. And he has this kind of militaristic combination, religious evangelical rhetoric that he's just hammering home because he can't win on unemployment is skyrocketing. The economy is shit. COVID was terrible. He can't win on actual policies because he didn't have any. So where he's able to win on is family values and God, and saying we're the good ones. He's the evil one. We're God. He's devil, and that type of language.
I mean, just devoid of politics. I think presidents surviving the COVID pandemic politically has been tough internationally. No matter what side they were on, no matter if they believed it was real or like Bolsonaro completely sowed a bunch of doubt and treated it like it was nothing, even though how many people died in Brazil?
Over 650,000. So yeah. And in fact, there was an investigation done by the Senate. Was it earlier this year, last year? Anyway, it was an investigation done by Brazil, and actually came out and accused the president of 8 different crimes, including crimes against humanity, for failing to protect indigenous communities. And for also, I don't know if you guys remember when all of the oxygen ran out in the city of Manaus. Like, people were dying from not having oxygen. It was a huge deal. And in fact, I talk about it briefly in the podcast.
Yeah.
But that was also blaming his government for not taking measures beforehand, because you could see what was going with the oxygen, and also taking more action afterwards. So yeah, I mean, and they said, literally, people said, came in, infectologists said hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. And Bolsonaro just went in the opposite direction.
But there's that sounds like more accountability than we've gotten in this country for similar crimes against humanity of not being prepared. But anyway, let's go back to the election.
Can I ask? I have a stupid question.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is voter turnout like in Brazil?
So voter turnout, this is not a stupid question. This is actually a really important question. Voter turnout
See, it was
is
a trick
mandatory.
question.
So it is,
I was pretending to be dumb, but I'm smart.
so this is not like the US, where 30%, 40% of the population. So in Brazil, it's mandatory. It's your not just your right or your duty, but it's actually required. Now, if you don't turn up to vote, you pay a fine of like, a couple bucks. It's not that big of a deal, but still, like the percentage of the population that votes is very, very large. Now, what many people will come out and do if they don't want to vote for any of the candidates is they'll vote blank. They'll just kind of write their name on it, and then it's all now computerized now. But they'll pass the thing through, and then nobody gets that vote, or they'll void it. They'll write in, I don't know, Mickey Mouse or whatever else. So that happens to a certain percentage of the votes, but still the amount of people that turn out to vote, it's huge. It's massive because it's mandatory. So good question.
Good question, Nina. But I had a question about, everyone is talking about in those same ways that in the lead up to the 2020 election with Trump, that Trump will not accept the results no matter what they are. If he loses effectively. What's being said about Bolsonaro? We're hearing the exact same thing said about Bolsonaro. He's not going to accept the results. What's going to happen? Where's the military going to come down? How will he try and stay in power? What have you heard? What is the latest? And how much evidence is there to show that he will do just that?
Yeah, this is the most important question. This is what everybody's asking themselves, and unfortunately, the answer is not easy, right? He himself has said, "Well, if I were going to do a coup, I wouldn't come out and tell you about it." But at the same time, he comes out and says, "Oh, we need to do, military intervention." This has been his phrase for forever. We need to close Congress. We need to close the Supreme Court. His people have come out and called for military intervention forever, and he has been really following the Trump line, since before his presidential election, but particularly over the last 2 years, talking about how, there's fraud in the system, talking about how, we need the military there to monitor. In fact, his latest thing a couple of months ago was that he wanted the military to be able to film inside voting booths, to be able to ensure that everything is legitimate, which is nightmarish if you consider that Brazil just 30 years ago ended a military dictatorship that lasted for 24 years. So that's not a good idea. But anyway, so all of this is real. He came out just September 7th was the big bicentennial Independence Day celebrations. They had it just last week. And during that time, Bolsonaro kind of co-opted that and made it into these big pro-Bolsonaro rallies around the country. And literally that morning, he came out and he was mentioning other complicated times in the history. And he mentioned the 1964 coup. And then he said, well, history can repeat itself. It can happen again. So he's kind of laying this undertone of this is going to happen, and making everybody super nervous about it. And that's for a reason, because people throughout his government and since before, look, the military dictatorship, it hangs over everything in Brazil like this dark shadow. It always has. In fact, just 3 years ago, it was right after COVID was kind of spiking. It was April of that year, of 2020. My wife was posting stuff on Facebook. Bolsonaro was really laying it into the governors. He was laying it into Congress and Supreme Court. He was talking about potential coup, whatever, anything else. And my wife's, her dad actually wrote us and said, "Hey, have Sylvia please not post on Facebook because things could get dangerous." So that's how much of a shadow the dictatorship hangs over on top of everything. And here's the thing: we don't really know what could happen, and we don't know exactly how the military lines up. There was a study that was done that was just released last week, in which it showed that it looked like the Air Force and the Navy were the two branches of government that were more closely in line with Bolsonaro's misinformation about fraud, potential fraud in the elections, whatever. And they might be the branches of the government that might be more aligned with helping Bolsonaro to enact some sort of a coup, January 6th moment. But again, it's hard to say. Would all the military be on board? The other thing that is really important to this question is the fact that Bolsonaro, since the end of the dictatorship, you basically have the military has been broken into these two branches. One of them, which is the majority, was down with re-democratization. The other one, which is Bolsonaro's, and it's smaller, wanted to stay with the coup. And so at this point, it's really hard to say. The one other thing I'd say, Francesca, is that civil society social movements, people in Brazil do not want that. Less than 10% of the population said they want a coup. And in fact, they were out in the streets marching for democracy on August 11th. More than 1 million people signed this letter in defense of democracy, saying, above all, we want to defend whatever the results are of this election are. So that's really key in the sense that it's a different moment than what we saw 50 years ago with the Brazilian coup. And many people are saying, even if Bolsonaro tries it, it's not likely he's going to be successful. And that's what we're hoping. Right?
It's interesting because it's, I was just going to say, because the United States, usually we're the one backing the coups elsewhere. And so I felt like we were caught flat footed, like, wait a minute. And, Trump supporters do not know how to identify a coup when it happens. They're like, yeah, hell yeah. Democracy? What? So there's a less of appreciation for it, I think, in this country. NATO.
I wanted to ask a question about Lula, because Lula was president before in the early aughts, and what's your assessment of how Lula and the Workers' Party of 2022 is different from the Workers' Party of the 2003 period?
God, this is like a dissertation, which I won't give you right now, but I'm going to try and do this really tight. But I mean, this is a huge question. First off, just remember that when Lula left office in 2010, January 1st, he had an approval rating that was almost 90%. It was huge, right? So that's really key. He is the icon. If you could mix like Mahatma Gandhi and Obama and Cesar Chavez, because Lula, he comes from the fight against the dictatorship from the end of the Beyonce, everybody. Right. That's Lula. Now, remember, he was jailed on these corruption charges. And that's what blocked him from running in the 2018 elections. And then those were absolved, essentially. He was let out of jail. And here's the thing. They had and we're not going to get into the intricacies of the anti-corruption lawsuit, but basically it was found that the judge who had been pushing this anti-corruption lawsuit for years, Sergio Moro, had been biased against Lula and so many others. And in fact, the Supreme Court came out and said that the case against Lula in that case should not even have been tried in Curitiba. And at the same time, there were 26 or 27 different lawsuits brought up against Lula for different levels of corruption and stuff. And all of them have been tossed out by the courts. So it was actually attacks by, the use of lawfare, the use of law as a way to try and tank Lula and tank the Workers' Party. Now, this was really key, and it's important that you did bring this up, because this was one of the main things that happened back in 2018 and why Bolsonaro found his way to come into power. Bolsonaro would not have won in 2018 if Lula hadn't been jailed and if there hadn't been this huge anti-corruption kind of scandal that was trying to tank the left and tank the Workers' Party. So the Workers' Party was really tainted at that point. But since these leaks from The Intercept came out back in 2019, showing how Judge Sergio Moro had worked together with the prosecutors to try folks on the left, how he had worked to try and tank the left, then that whole kind of lawsuit, it's kind of been, people are just over it. They're just like, So of course you have Bolsonaro supporters, and Bolsonaro has about a third of the country. And of course, they still believe that Lula is the most corrupt politician there ever was in the history of the country, and that the Workers' Party is the worst thing ever, and that they're trying to create a dictatorship of the proletariat and communism and whatever, yada, yada, yada. But the reality is that would be, that's right. But the reality is that Lula, he is still one of the most, especially now after he's been absolved, essentially, that people are on board, and people are much more willing to vote for Lula than they would be, but almost any other candidate. And that's why the chances of Bolsonaro winning in this election are just, even if he has a third of the country, you just can't see how he can come back and make it work. Lula is up ahead in the polls, and he's most likely going to win.
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, I hope that does happen, and I also hope that we can check in about Lula being part of the pink wave in Latin America is always super fascinating to me, and the ways that that pink wave kind of lost its edge and sort of calcified and really needed to support successors. Dilma Rousseff was one of them, but she obviously also got taken down in the corruption bullshit that happened. But anyway, I guess I wanted to just also remind people that Lula did serve almost two terms, and you can serve a third, I believe, or more terms, but just not consecutively. Can you serve
right.
2 more terms?
Yeah, so that's how it works, and I don't know how. I should know this. I don't know how many, but not consecutively. That's the point. You go
Right.
2, and then you move on. Then your successor, and that's when Dilma Rousseff won in 2010, and then was then president for, like you said, a term and a half before she was taken out by a coup, and that's how come he's allowed to serve again. Exactly, great point.
With this, and basically like a parliamentarian coup, correct?
That's right. That's exactly what happened with Dilma. And in fact, just to put a pinpoint on that, she was taken out for they called them budgetary maneuvers, and it's basically when you pull funds from one part of the government to another in order to balance the budget. That's what she was doing. Every administration does it.
God.
The day after she was ousted from power and the Senate voted to impeach her, the Senate then voted to legalize the exact thing that she had just done. I mean, I remember this. Mind-boggling.
No,
it's terrifying. So
it is terrifying.
Does the fact that Bolsonaro was massively impacted with feces affect the election in any way at all?
Massively impacted with what?
Feces? Wasn't he hospitalized for having?
Oh, that's right.
He had
a huge amount of.
He had doo-doo removed from his stomach through his nose, and I want everyone to know that.
Yeah. It should impact the election, but we haven't been hearing about it very often.
Yeah.
So
he had so much shit in him that the shit gets a vote.
Yeah. It was bad. It was ugly.
Shit became sentient and was like, we're voting for Lula.
What's interesting though is that he used that moment to not have to go to debates. Right? He said, "Well, I just got stabbed and I'm sick." So they said, "Well, you can Zoom in from home. That's fine." He said, "No, it's okay. I just won't do it." So,
like, how long after that procedure are you just straight tasting shit in your mouth? Like I'm sorry. And that to me is the best we can hope for, or maybe not, but for Bolsonaro seeing his day. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.